to Talking Supply Chain. In each episode, top supply chain industry professionals and the nation's top thought leaders join host Brian Strait and share their unique insights to help supply chain managers stay one step ahead of their competition. This is Talking Supply Chain. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Talking Supply Chain. I'm your host, Brian Strait. Today, we're talking about an area of the warehouse that's often overlooked, but where there is hidden savings that you can take advantage of. And I'm talking about pallet building and pallet matching. For many organizations, palletization is still a manual process, but Lucas Systems is among the companies pushing the industry forward with new technologies that apply AI-driven optimization, real-time orchestration, and next-gen worker tools to this part of the warehouse that rarely gets the spotlight from shippers and carriers. Joining me today to discuss this is Kyle Franklin, solutions expert at Lucas Systems, and he's going to break down where the hidden opportunities are, how modern pallet technologies work, and why the future of warehouse productivity starts long before a pallet is actually built. Kyle, welcome to Talking Supply Chain. It's great to have you.
All right, thanks for having me, Brian. Appreciate it.
Great. Let's kick things off a little bit with some background, if you could. Maybe a little bit on Lucas Systems and yourself and your role at Lucas and what you guys do.
Yeah, pleased to do it. Lucas Systems is a warehouse execution software company specializing in optimizing distribution center processes, things like order picking, replenishment, put away, etc. We're most commonly known as the people behind Jennifer, voice-directed picking, and we've been in this space for nearly 30 years. We've been pioneers in not only voice-directed software, but in advancing techniques and software using AI, machine learning to enable optimization and unlock efficiency within the four walls of the DC. We really focus on the end user, that hourly associate that's picking orders all day, and our goal is to make their lives easier. We do it by making them more efficient, more accurate, and providing them with a great user interface and experience. Myself, I graduated undergrad at the height of the 2009 financial crisis and landed in like medical device warehouse. And after working there in another logistics firm, I went back to business school with the goal of leveraging this understanding of supply chain from the ground up and hoping to pair it with technology. After doing internships and consulting for the likes of Amazon, Giant Eagle, and Siemens while in school, I found a perfect marriage of these worlds at Lucas Systems, and that's where I've been for the last 8 years. As a senior solution consultant, my primary job is to understand the pain points, constraints, and advantages of a distribution center by working closely with those who operate it and translate that to our in-house team of software engineers to help design these optimized execution systems. Luckily for me, that's taken me all over the world, leading implementations here in the US, Canada, Europe, Asia, and the South Pacific.
So you started during a massive disruption time, and then you ended
Mhm.
up traveling the world. So
Yeah, yeah. Very lucky. It's worked out for me very well. The road to get there was not always easy, but yeah, it's worked out.
great. Um, yeah, we're going to discuss pallet and pallet building today. It is something that every warehouse does, right? I mean, and no matter at some point you're building pallets, but it's not something I think many pay attention to, and they certainly don't optimize pallet building. So, can you set the stage for the conversation today by talking a little bit about why, like, this part of the warehouse is overlooked by so many, and why it's we don't pay attention to the process of optimizing pallet building?
Yeah. I think it kind of comes down to two main things. Firstly, like picking case of the pallets to a case of product to a pallet. It's been around forever. It's been around for quite some time since really we started using pallets, right? And on its face, it seems quite simple. It's a process that's probably the most common one across distribution centers, whether it's grocery, healthcare, retail, both big and small. An associate drives or walks around a DC throwing cases on a pallet in sequence, in the standard warehouse location sequence, hoping to build the Jenga blocks in a way that it won't topple over. For many, it doesn't seem like much more than that. In fact, where technologies and techniques have been applied to these processes, it's primarily concerned with like just making that same standard process faster without really analyzing or rejiggering the process. Voice picking is one innovation that got an early foothold here, starting in grocery, in order to speed up users at the point of pick. And another would be like engineered labor standards and incentive pay to get users to drive and move and pick faster. But both of those have been standard in the industry for decades now. Secondly, I think a lot of it is because the oxygen in the conversation has been taken up by the explosion in e-commerce growth. Mostly innovation in DC technology, when you talk about autonomous mobile robots, sortation systems, goods to person systems, they've all been aimed at trying to help firms get small orders out the door faster. I mean, we're we're even guilty of it here at Lucas. Our first foray into using like AI and machine learning algorithms to do pick path, batch pick, and containerization optimization was really focused on like pick to cart type operations starting 8 years ago. Now, over the last few years, we've been able to take those learnings and apply it back to pallets by looking at pallet matching as well as pallet building.
Yep. So a lot has changed. I mean, I remember when I was a kid growing up, I used to hang out. My grandfather was a truck driver, and I would help him unload and pack pallets and things, right?
Mhm.
I'd pick up a box, I'd put it on the pallet. I didn't know what I was doing, right? We've added, obviously, over time, we've gotten better at that. Technology is now available, and we're adding a lot of that. And Lucas just introduced a new pallet building technology, your dynamic pallet builder, right? So can you talk about especially for the listeners maybe who don't know how these technologies are being implemented and what they're actually doing for the process of building pallets and how that compares to what we know of traditional palletization processes.
Yeah, so like before we talk about like what the next generation or what now looks like, the kind of problems with like traditional palletization that you might run into. You're right, it does seem it is often pretty simple or it seems really simple. One, to build a good pallet, it requires like a level of expertise and tribal knowledge by the associates in order to stack and create them. They need to have knowledge of their products, where they are in the DC, to know how to shuffle things around, how to resequence their path or save a spot for a certain product they know is coming up. They might have to know what's on the entire order and kind of internalize that. And what that does is it leads to like longer ramp up times to productivity for new pickers because they don't have that same tribal knowledge. And then you have wasted time kind of at the beginning of any kind of task because people are planning workout or trying to work around these constraints. You have potential for like increased damages because products can get crushed or torn by heavier items on top or by being in the wrong sequence or from pallets falling over, along with like other safety concerns. Um, Third thing, kind of, typical mitigation for most DCs is that you slot your products in a warehouse if you're doing case pick from heavy to light. So it means your heaviest items are on one side of the warehouse and you kind of work lighter. That way, a picker can go in like a simple sequence and shouldn't encounter an item that crushes something that they've already picked and put on their pallet. But this constrains kind of the available locations for any particular product to an area and doesn't allow a DC to fully optimize that slotting. So it could cause some like slower moving products to be in real, prime locations or prime real estate simply because it's heavier or denser and needs to be placed earlier in the pick path. So you have fewer ways to kind of affect change and things across the DC. Both dynamic palette builder and our palette match functionality kind of work around and enhance these constraints by taking that tribal knowledge and sort of digitizing it. And we'll kind of talk more about how that works in different ways, I guess.
Yep. So you mentioned something there, the idea that you're constrained about where you can place items in the warehouse, right? So that's a productivity issue
Mhm.
ultimately for for the warehouse operation, right? Because things may be much farther away than they need to be, or they may be much too close. Other thing, it creates it. So can you explain for organizations that use pallet building, pallet matching, how that changes the productivity equation for the operation in the warehouse?
Yeah, it can be a significant change in a lot of places. So like with palette with just like the building itself, you have users either waste time like planning or looking through their order sheets, as I mentioned, or restacking the pallets as they pick, or worse, like deliver a shaky pallet to the dock and then have to have associates there restack it. So that you would think anywhere between like 5 and 20%, time savings just from kind of dealing and stopping and rehandling your pallets as you're going along. Um, we were talking to one prospect a few years ago, and they were picking automotive parts, and they were picking cases of them to a pallet on a man-up order picker. So in order to keep that expensive equipment moving and keep those users going, they just picked in very standard location sequence and then delivered these unstructured pallets to the dock. But there, they had a whole additional entire team that took apart each and every pallet and rebuilt it for better stackability and better shippability. And they did that all day. So they're essentially doubling their labor and doubling their touches just to do simple order picking. On, kind of pallet matching, the cost might be, just extra travel. So extra travel going through the warehouse to get all of these items because it's not optimized well. So that, that can lead to savings anywhere, 10 to 20%, if not much more, on the high end.
So, and you guys, one of the things I read about Lucas Systems is that you believe that pallet building does not start when you have everything ready to put on the pallet, right? It actually starts much earlier than that, even as early as the picking stage with, to do that. Can you
Mhm.
talk about that as what do you mean by that and how the picking strategy that you use, how does that impact the way the pallet gets built and why that matters?
Yeah, Lucas in general, and like whether we're talking about pallets or even, small parcels and things like that, where we do our best work is where we can affect and create assignments before they get handed to the associate. So one such way is with best pallet matching, as I mentioned earlier. So
Mhm.
when I'm picking to a double or triple pallet jack, for instance, I'm able to pick more than one pallet at a time, which is very common in a high volume distribution center. The standard way to go about that is to make sure that both pallets are for a single customer order. A good example of that is in grocery. So a typical store order might span multiple pallets, up to a full truck, if not more. So a pallet, or so an assignment might be one pallet full of, say, heavier items like cans of soup and sauce, and then working to lighter items like boxes of pasta and mixes and things like that on the second pallet. Because these products are typically slotted in different aisles of the warehouse, a picker will have to traverse multiple aisles in order to finish their assignment because you're going to stop at the cans, you're going to go down to the other cans, a pop, and then you're going to work your way down. What Best Palette Match does is say, when I have my first palette assigned, what are the other palettes that might actually pair best with this original palette for travel savings? An example would be picking the pallets of heavy cans for two different stores at once. And this significantly minimizes the travel across the DC because you're only traversing that one aisle full of cans. Then we use our pallet building and mapping tools to make sure that we take them to individual bins in the ideal sequence before taking a user through the staging process to make sure that the orders are correctly married up with in the right lanes at the end.
Yeah. So that's the picking process, right? I mean, so
Mhm.
you're saying that that matters and making sure that pallet is built correctly, but those those workers that are doing that process have to know what they're doing, right? Right?
Mhm.
So is can warehouse execution systems, warehouse management systems, do they play a role in maybe getting that worker set up so that they are set up for success?
Yeah, absolutely. They play a huge role. So mainly in that you want to resequence or sequence the pick list in a way that it makes the user's decisions really easy. They can go just step by step, line by line, as the device or the computer tells them to go to the next step, and they don't have to worry as much about trying to make those decisions and jump out of order and trying to over optimize. So you handle that kind of planning up front in your creation process.
Mhm.
Um, Now, typical WMS systems don't really, or even ERPs and things, don't really go into this level of detail when creating assignments. The few that do really only kind of do very basic, simple rules or very custom rules by like picking by department, for instance, or looking at like even a count of like SKUs to do matching. You need an advanced warehouse execution system or a WMS module that's customized and tailored to your specific operation that's very close to the user experience in order to do that pick execution and planning. And it's rare that they have a level of focus on this level of batch optimization and palletization. Otherwise, you kind of leave it to the users and the DC to fend for themselves.
Yeah. So to be clear, it sounds like what you're saying is that a lot of legacy systems may not have the capabilities to do this. Is that something that can be added on to them, or are companies looking at if they want to take advantage of this stuff? Are they looking at have to put in all new a new WMS system, I should say?
Yeah, it's a great question. So some of the tier one packages can have modules for it, although like the out of the box kind of functionality with them can be constrained. And like I said, it's usually more genericized, so it's a lot simpler. So it can help in some DCs more than others. But a lot of times what you're doing is you're reaching out to a work execution system, something like Lucas's. to kind of fill in those gaps in the WMS. And that's where you can get like it's essentially like adding a supercharger onto an existing engine. And that's where you can really affect this change. You're working with people who are like focused on this specific task. WMS systems are big monoliths, right? A lot of times they're dealing with inventory and pricing and invoicing and all kind of financial details as well. So it's you really want something that's close to the processes as needed.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the technology in these types of systems, these palletization systems, the pallet matching systems, et cetera. And obviously, AI is being incorporated into this stuff. You've got smart algorithms. How do those things work? And do
Mhm.
they work? Is it something that companies can take advantage of to help them create that what I guess what we would call the best palette configuration, right? The making sure. I mean, you mentioned. I mean, obviously the standard is you put the heavy stuff on the bottom, lighter stuff on top,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Mhm.
but can you build that palette in a way that not only puts heavy stuff on bottom, lighter stuff on top, but also makes it easier for the drivers on the other end, the truck drivers, maybe as they unload these things, especially if they're like e-commerce or smaller parcels where maybe the whole pallet isn't being unloaded at once at a
Right.
location.
Yeah, so we there's a few different ways or techniques you can kind of go about this. So we primarily use a combination of a map of the warehouse that we recreate digitally, a set of AI traveling salesman algorithms, and then item information. And what we use that to kind of abstract warehouse travel, other barriers and constraints into costs. This lets us blends the rules together to kind of have a cohesive, optimized solution. So, like, what is the lowest cost thing, even if it is not directly, dollars and cents? It might be travel, it might be heavier lifts, it might be suboptimal sorting. We try to blend all those together to create optimized pallets. We run these systems as we import work and create pallets and assignments. And then again, as we hand assignments to users so that their pick paths are optimized when picking more than one order at a time. There are other techniques as well. There's a lot of work going in like 3D modeling of palettes and configuration based on the item dimension. That technique is a little more reliant on item dimensions and item data being perfect from manufacturers, which in the distribution center space we know is a tall ask. So we kind of went about it with the more map and rules engine based, but those advancements are happening right now for sure.
The as you implement it, as companies implement these solutions, I think obviously there's a bunch of reasons why they may do it, right? Productivity being a big one. Another thing that I read in researching before we got on this call was about decision making and worker safety. So, can you talk a little bit about how the technologies that are being implemented in pallets these days is advancing that what we know about pallet building so that we can actually make decision making easier or quicker? And does it have an impact on worker safety on the other end of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things we try to do is take the techniques and strategies employed by our best pickers, order selectors, super users, supervisors, and we try to systematize them. That's why we spend so much time with the end users in our warehouse visits for both sales and as well as our like design workshops. We want to democratize that tribal knowledge that those experienced
Mhm.
users have and that learning so that new users can get up to speed faster while then systematizing the rules so that we reduce the cognitive load on that experienced labor force. One example, concrete from like pallet building is say an order has a really heavy item and it's slotted way on the end of the warehouse from the rest of the order. The rest of the order is all pretty light crushable items, right? Our algorithm, if we have all the rules in, will resequence the list to have the user start with the heavy item, using that as a base, and then come back and pick the light items, even if it's extra travel. In another case, say the same order is about the same locations, but the rest of the items in that list were dense enough not to be crushable. They weren't as heavy as a big heavy item, but they were okay to hold themselves up. Our list would then optimize for travel, picking the bulk of the order before going and finishing with that heavy item to go on top and then go to the dock. That like flexibility mirrors how an intelligent picker will plan their work. It just happens much faster, and then you don't need a person with 10 years of experience to do it right. We're essentially democratizing that knowledge to everyone. It has an impact on safety as well because the fewer lifts and things, reshuffling you have to do of a pallet, will just reduce your ergonomic load on a user. You have fewer opportunities to drop things or pull your back out, and if you just you're also spending less time throughout the day, so you should be less wear and tear on the body for these order pickers. And as we know, like in case pick to pallet, it's often one of the hardest kind of labor intensive processes you can do in a warehouse. So anything we can do to save them time, efficiency, lift steps is very helpful.
Yep. I want to follow up on that. You mentioned tribal knowledge as part of this, right? So I think a lot of cases when we introduce technologies in different areas of the supply chain, it sometimes doesn't take into consideration what it actually is like in the real world. But it sounds
Mhm.
like that you're using what's actually taking place on the warehouse floor to help inform how this system will operate.
Absolutely. I have a saying I always want to like when we're doing design workshops or like say even just sales visits, I need to talk to the people who actually have to do the process. Every company I've ever talked to, whether it's in warehousing or software or anything else, there's a perception or an idea of how all the processes work from the top and then how it's actually done on the ground. And there's going to be some misalignment there. It's going to be either
Yeah,
completely out of whack or really close, but there's going to be some misalignment because the users on the ground just will encounter much more situations and much more variability, and they have to deal with it the way they can deal with it. So I need to understand that stuff. I need to understand the exceptions before I can design a good system. I cannot listen to the and read just off the SOP that's posted up in the IT guy's office of how they're supposed to do it. That's not going to be real life, and that's why we try to talk to and work with pickers as much as possible.
yeah, because I think we've all probably worked jobs at some point in our life where we worked side by side with that guy who's been there for 30 years and says,
Mhm.
"Yeah, I know they tell you to do it this way, but do it this way. Trust me."
Right. And then we also want to tease out when that 30-year person is like, oh, I do it this way. I need to know if there is a downstream mal effect to that as well. So I need to
Yeah,
talk to both sides because I don't know if the way he's doing it is screwing up the inventory for the next year because of the way he's doing it either. So I need to understand both sides of that equation.
yeah, yeah. We've obviously these systems are infused with technology in many different types of technology. So does this technology does it include things like voice enablement systems, real-time instructions for people on the floor? What kind of technologies are you utilizing in to improve the pallet building process? And I guess specifically the accuracy and speed, right? Because that's the whole idea here to improve productivity.
Yeah, so I would say 90% of like Lucas's implementations include some, or even processes include some voice enabled component. Not every single one, but the vast majority do. But we do it when it makes sense. We also try to match any kind of mobile technology or devices used to the process whenever possible. So we don't have like one model of device that goes everywhere. We might use a wearable in some, small e-commerce environments. We might use a small handheld mobile computer with a scanner if they're doing a lot of scanning or validation of lots or serial numbers, or we have like a full tablet mounted on equipment because they need to see data, a lot more data on screen, and it makes more sense. We try to really match that ergonomically with what's happening. As far as like prompting and instructions, one big focus of ours in our design language is that we want users to get the right information, and more importantly, the right amount of information at the right time. If we overburden them with too much information, like when you hand somebody a stack of order sheets, they might spend too much time kind of reshuffling or replanning or over optimizing sometimes. Or if you say announce a special instruction for a product at the beginning of an order, they may forget it by the time they get to the actual pick bin. So we really try to limit how much data or words are even on the screen at any given time in order to keep the user focused on the very next task or the very next step that's ahead. And that's how we can help them out with both accuracy because we're not distracting them in order for them to get products wrong or incorrect, and then speed along with that as well for the same reasons.
Yeah. I want to ask you a couple questions kind of about the customer side of this, right? I mean, because it's fabulous that you can do this in the warehouse, but there are impacts outside of that, right?
Mhm.
I want to start by asking you if you have can you show us, or can you tell us anything, maybe any customers you may have or specific use cases that you have that you can share, and the impact that this type of technology has had on their processes, on the ability to make the pallets, reducing errors, productivity gains, etc. Do
Yeah.
you have any kind of use case or something you can explain, kind of show us, right, the actual impact these things are having?
Absolutely. So, one thing I love about, working here at Lucas is that we, put just as much focus and care into like the big firms as we do with like the littler guys, right? So for Associated Wholesale Grocers, they're the largest independent grocery distributor in the country.
Mhm.
We looked at they were picking two pallets and sometimes three pallets at a time on a pallet jack. They were always for a single customer. So they had a lot of orphaned pallets. They were just like, stragglers, but then a lot of them were, two pallets for the same customer. And like the example I mentioned earlier, where they're going through and picking two or three different departments for a grocery store. We looked at breaking those up into best pallet matched two pallet assignments for different customers. And overall, they were able to cut travel by about 20% by cutting out those extra aisles. This led to an overall productivity improvement of about 10% once you take out the time of pick. And while that sounds small, 10% for an operation as large as theirs, that translated to about $7 million in savings across their DC network. That's, more on-time shipments. That's, easier time for the drivers, less waiting time, all those things. For Veritable Vegetable, who are a small specialty grocery distributor and our organic food distributor out of San Francisco. We use our pallet building technology as well as some of these techniques, and a big focus was about providing the right information to users at the right time. And we were able to help them reduce errors by about 40%, um, while making it easier for them to pick multiple orders on a single pallet at one time for pick travel efficiency. This also helped reduce the need for a lot of tribal knowledge, what they had a lot of, and product training as well. For the downstream customers of theirs, because they were so small and they're essentially getting and ordering like avocados from a specific farm in Northern California or elsewhere, they were able to make sure that those items got there on time in the correct quantities for their, maybe for their restaurant runs later that day. Like, so if essentially items out of stock, they don't get to, they have to take things out of the menu. So reducing those errors by 40% led to a lot of downstream benefits for their customer base across the area.
I'm fabulous that you mentioned Veritable Vegetable there, because I did a story years ago with them. I was so
Oh, well.
impressed with their operations, probably 8, 10 years ago that I did this, and their operation was so impressive in the things that they did and the forward thinking that they had at the time. So I guess I'm not surprised that they're implementing this kind of technologies as well.
Yeah, no, they really have done so much with, their constraints that they have. Their homegrown system is really well designed. But it's still just kind of bumped up against a ceiling as far as like optimization. So I was really
Yep.
glad when they brought us in. I got to do the workshop with them and got to do the whole go live and let it out of the training. And like they, it can't take all the credit as Lucas, like them and us together. We really developed a good system that helped those users a lot. And yeah, hopefully it's helping their customers right now.
Yeah. Yeah. They're a great organization,
Hmm.
for everything I can tell. Um, I think as the customers look at this, right? I think customers, shippers especially, look at things in a couple ways, right? Did the stuff get to the warehouse so it could be shipped? Did it arrive to the end customer on time, right? And I
Hmm.
don't know that shippers always pay attention to everything else that happens involved in this process. So, but I think if you're talking about improving the pallet quality, improving the utilization, the productivity gains, et cetera, there are downstream effects that take place. There's more transportation efficiency, right? Maybe you're shipping a few less pallets because you packed it correctly, which increases cube utilization in the trailers. Maybe there's less damage to products. Can you kind of take us outside the four walls of the facility now and kind of talk about some of the benefits that you see, some of the downstream benefits that you'll see, that shippers will see if they implement this kind of technology inside the four walls?
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely hit on a few of them, right? So, less better stacked pallets means fewer air shipped in trucks, which increases that transportation efficiency and lowers the cost. You also have fewer damages because you have less places for things to kind of fly around. We also have other tools like our loading module that help you like load things on that aren't palletized and keep that tracked. So people are less afraid of down stack pallets in order to really, really stuff those trucks full. It allows you to kind of also, consolidate routes. So you need fewer drivers, or when you have call outs, you have your ability to kind of flip and adjust on increased schedule flexibility. When product shows up damaged at a customer or missing even, it often falls back on that like sales person or support team. They essentially have to stop their day and hot run product out to a customer for fear of losing them to another distributor because
Mhm.
these markets are so competitive. So those indirect benefits can be significant. As far as like just the best pallet match and the efficiency side, faster picking and fewer touches of restacking leads to more efficiency, more predictability. You can get your dock turned over much more quickly, so you aren't wasting time like restacking pallets. That you get those drivers loaded and get them on the road, so they're waiting around less, and then that's more on time deliveries for customers as well. And anytime you can improve door turns both in speed and predictability, you get an added benefit of flexibility and timing for your waves. And that gives even further opportunities for optimization, right? So you can adjust your shift times. You have some graveyard shift that everybody kind of hates. You can move that forward because you're going to get the product out the door. And there's a lot of HR and other benefits to that as well.
Yep. And I want to finish up with two kind of questions, kind of broader picture kind of questions for our audience. Let me start with this one though. Supply chain leaders have a lot on their mind these days, right? I mean,
Yeah.
resilience is an issue, rising costs, tariffs is, I mean, there's so many different things right now that they're dealing with at the moment. Can you talk about why they should be thinking about pallet optimization right now? Why should that be part of their conversation when they've got all these other things that they're concerned with? And does that help in any way with some of these other things they're already concerned with?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like you mentioned resiliency. When people like ask me about like resiliency, I think about like having a dynamic warehouse and being
Mm,
dynamic. Having a DC that can react in a cost-efficient way to changes is so key in today's environment. You can build the fastest, highest throughput piece of automation, some automated pick tower, and everything's flying around, and it's for a particular type of order or product, but those changes can come at you thick and fast. They can come from customers, they can come from competitors, suppliers, and that rate of change seems to be ever increasing. So as a leader, when I think about adding automation, I really want to think about flexible automation whenever possible. You don't want to be put into a box because you built out like a big piece of physical automation that's now underutilized because suddenly your hottest product doesn't fit in it anymore. Another big decision point is whether you're talking about like greenfield or existing operations. Many of those like highest throughput systems for pallets, cases, and e-commerce can only really be placed in like new greenfield facilities because of various physical requirements like flat floors and height requirements and things like that. It's tougher and much more costly to like shove them into existing warehouses if it's possible at all. So for many existing operations, that human picking isn't going away anytime soon. And there's once you run out of like I can make the forklifts only this much faster, I need to look at software and optimization in order to make those assignments easier for users to execute and speed them up.
yep. A great conversation so far. I want to follow with a final question. I'm going to assume that you've done a great job selling these technologies, and a lot of listeners out there are sitting here saying now, hey, I need to explore this, right? I need to explore pallet building technology, pallet matching, but I don't really know where to start on this. So can you give some advice to them as far as what's that starter conversation they need to have? Is it internal? How do they get this process started? How do they not just need to start thinking about this process?
Yeah, so we kind of talked earlier about how like looking at palette picking in general is often overlooked just because it seems so simple. So I'd almost kind of go back to that start and say, when was the last time we actually looked at this or changed anything significant, and kind of start there. You may find that like it's been a number of years, and in my experience, very few warehouses have undergone no change in the last
Mhm.
decade, whether it was tariff stuff, COVID, e-commerce, whatever. So I think doing a review with fresh eyes is important. Particularly, I'd look at like where you can affect travel, waste it touches, labels, paper in general, like the associated waste with that. Like, does this customer need a label in every single case? And if they do, well, are you charging them for it? Things like that. And then how customer demands have changed in general. Obviously, if you want to reach out to myself or Lucas, if you want a hand with that, well, we're more than happy to talk to you. But I would definitely start there and look at like how has things changed, and is there any way for me to re-look at this process, from the ground up.
No. Great, Kyle. Thank you so much. Why don't we give you a chance there to tell the listeners if they want to reach out to Lucas and learn more about what you guys are doing with pallets and technologies? How do they
Absolutely.
do that? What's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Our main, homepage, lucasware.com, we have tons of material up, a lot of thought leadership, a lot of case studies and white papers up on the website. And it's a great way to get started and see if like one of these applications kind of fits what you did, or you can reach out to us through the website and we'll figure that out for you or help you figure it out. We also have a number of great videos, both explainers and like user videos of actually using the software on YouTube, and then on LinkedIn, of course, we're posting. So happy to have a conversation with you anytime, preferably in your distribution center, so we can take a look along with you. But yeah, either way works.
No, great. Great. Kyle, thank you so much. Appreciate the time today.
Hey, Brian, I really appreciate you having me on.
Great. We are out of time. I want to thank my guests for today, Kyle Franklin of Lucas Systems, for joining me. And of course, all of you who took time out of your day to listen to us today. We greatly appreciate it. New episodes of Talking Supply Chain come out on Thursdays. You can find them on scmr.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So to be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, I'm Brian Straight, and you've been listening to Talking Supply Chain. Talking Supply Chain is produced by Supply Chain Management Review and Peerless Media. You can find it on scmr.com, supplychain247.com, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. For more information on this topic or to sign up for our weekly newsletter, a print or a digital subscription to our publication, visit scmr.com. We hope you will join us for our next episode. For Supply Chain Management Review, I'm Brian Straight, and thank you for listening.